So, when people ask about the big difference between Western and Vedic astrology, one of the things that comes up a lot is the spirituality within Vedic astrology. And what does that really mean? Well, in today's episode, we're going to go deeper into the spirituality and the philosophy behind Vedic astrology, all the way back to the source text. So, any topic that you're learning about, if you want to go deeper into the root of it and really understand it, I think you always want to go back to the source text. Where does it come from? Who's teaching it? And sometimes there's not text, but in this case, there is. And it goes a lot deeper than that. So, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to show this. If you're watching the video, I have some nice visuals for this. But if you're listening, you'll be able to follow along just fine. So I'm Jeremy Devins. This is the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast, and this is where we talk about Vedic astrology, the ancient Indian tradition of understanding what's going on outside ourselves, so we can understand what's going on inside ourselves and make sense of WTF is happening in the world today. So we're going to go back all the way to the roots, to the four great sayings, the philosophy behind Vedic astrology. What are the four great sayings? Well, to answer that question, we've got to look all the way back to the Vedas. And we say Vedic astrology, we're talking about this is coming from the Vedas. The Vedas are these source texts of all ancient Indian wisdom. And if you're watching the video, they look kind of like this. They're written down on palm leaves, and mainly it's passed down orally. So we'll talk about that in a second. But we got to really know what Veda is. Why do we say Veda? Well, Veda means wisdom, and it's where we get our modern word video, to see. It's a video is a recording of something exactly as it happened. And a Veda is understanding something exactly as it is, understanding with wisdom the truth of the situation. So in my experience, going all the way back to this stuff, when I found the Vedas and this old philosophy and the Upanishads, everything it said in there was like, this is just what I've been looking for. It feels resonant. It feels true. And from the Vedas, we get the Upanishads. So the Vedas are like the main teaching of this philosophy. And the Upanishads, the word Upanishad means to sit near, like a student sitting near a teacher. And it's what was written down in these dialogues of students with teachers. Well, what about this? The Vedas say that. How do we apply that to our life? What does it mean? How do we make sense of this? The Upanishads lay that out. So if you want to get into this philosophy beyond today's episode and want to understand how to really bring the spirituality into your life, the Upanishads is what I would recommend. Eknath Eswaran is a great translation. I really like this one that's a bit shorter, and basically any of them will be good, though, but the simpler, shorter ones are going to be easier to digest when you're first learning. So I usually recommend find a shorter, simpler version that sort of digests it all and summarizes it for you. And then if you want to go further beyond this, the Bhagavad Gita is a next step beyond this, which is more of just a one student to one teacher, Arjuna to Krishna dialogue of what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? How does this all make sense? And that is at the root of what we talk about in Vedic astrology and the philosophy behind it. So Upanishad, to sit near a teacher to learn. And what was taught was channeled wisdom. And this is the first really big point I want to make today, is that these ancient teachers, these rishis, would sit in meditation, and their role in society was like a doctor helps you heal from an injury, or a librarian helps you pick out a book. A rishi helps you connect to the divine. And that was their role in society. And that's very common still today in India, that there are gurus, there are teachers, and their role is to teach wisdom and to sit in meditation, to live an ascetic life, and to share that wisdom with others. And they're provided food and shelter and lodging and everything as they need. And they fit that role in society. But what's really interesting about that, and the big points I want to share, is that you too can channel in a similar way. You can receive information, insights, realizations, clarity through just sitting in meditation. Now, the rishis are a very interesting topic. I'm not going to go too far into, but basically what I would like to share in today's episode is that wisdom that they received through deep meditation and ascetic practices, I think, in my opinion, can be accessible to all of us. So it's not that we need somebody outside of us to tell us, but it is helpful when you get somebody who's dedicated their life to this to give us guidance. And that is what the Vedas are, this channeled wisdom. And the Vedas and Upanishads in the ancient Sanatana Dharma, or what we call modern day Hinduism, is this that is considered authoritative. The Vedas and Upanishads are the main authoritative text, and that authority comes from these people who dedicated their lives and their purpose in life to be rishis, to be channels, to be sages who share this wisdom with others. And I think, at least for a little bit, at least in moments, at least maybe in retreats or at times in our lives, we can access some of that same wisdom ourselves. And it is an oral tradition. So while it was written down on palm leaves, it was considered at the time that what was written down was less authoritative than what was passed down orally. So if you pass it down orally, then there's a cadence to it. And as I'll share in a moment, it's really cool to hear this. The chanting and the rhythm and the pattern of the Vedas is very complex and sort of difficult to fake or counterfeit or lie. And there's a sort of rhythm to it that just like flows and makes sense. And it was passed on orally, and it was believed that what was written could be more deceptive. And what was passed on orally had a translation of not just the words, but the feeling as well, and the cadence and the tone and the pitch and everything came with it. So it was more authoritative, more reliable wisdom. And there's still people today in 2020s who can chant the Vedas. It's a long journey, but it's happening. It can be done still, and it's passed down through this tradition. And this is a tradition, like I say, with the chanting, with the words, it's caught, not taught. And this is something my mentor would say is yoga is caught, not taught. My first mentor in yoga. And this applies to anything really. Like when I was trying to learn Vedic astrology without a mentor, I was so lost. It was so complicated. It's very, very deep and complex. But once I had a mentor, I saw how he did things. And it's not just what he said. Like if he did write a book called Astrology Yoga. Just if you just read that book, it's still not quite there compared to being in person or being in relationship in some way to like interact with that person, to ask questions, to pick it up. Yes, you can pick up some of this, right? There's many great people who are no longer alive who've written books. You can pick up a lot of their essence through the book and learn a lot. But so much is caught rather than taught, in the same way like a disease is caught and you have to be near somebody in proximity to catch it. You could say that as an example. But we don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about the good stuff that we can catch. And yoga is one of those things. Ayurveda, Jyotish, these are all things that I've caught from my teachers and hope to share. And hopefully it comes through in the podcast. And for those of you who work with me more deeply, definitely you get to everything I have to share. I get to share that with you. And one of the ways I'm sharing that right now is with the Become Your Own Yoga Teacher workshop. So if you're wanting to catch yoga a little more and go deeper in that practice, quietmind.yoga/workshop is where you can sign up right now for the Become Your Own Yoga Teacher workshop. Super fun. I share 10 ways to deepen your practice in there, ways to assess your practice, ways to create a daily check-in for yourself, and ways to release tensions as soon as they arise in the body. So working on the physical layer, but in my yoga teaching, we go much deeper than just the physical. But I do start there a lot of the time because that's where a lot of people come in with yoga. So quietmind.yoga/workshop, learn how to be your own yoga teacher, how to assess tensions in your body, and have a 10-step path to go deeper for the rest of life if you want, because it's a lifelong study, just like Jyotish, Vedic astrology. And if you want to go even further, the Quiet Mind Yoga Teacher Training is now open for enrollment for the next week until 10/10. And that's at quietmind.yoga/YTT. So if you like the workshop, check that out first. And if you like that, check out the Yoga Teacher Training. It's where we go really deep. And the small group, just 6 people, go very deep into the yoga studies of philosophy, history, anatomy, alignment, pranayama, mudras, mantra, all the major postures. The anatomy is very deep. Everything I teach is actually very deep, but we go very broad as well. So super cool stuff, super fun. I love sharing this. And that's at quietmind.yoga/YTT. Even if you don't want to be a teacher, which I did not think I would be a teacher, I just wanted to deepen my own practice. This is the best thing I could offer to deepen your practice. And then if you want to share it with others, you'll have the tools to do that as well, which most people find they actually really, really enjoy that. And the best way to be a student is to be a teacher. So you learn so much trying to teach others. You really have to learn a lot yourself. So quietmind.yoga/YTT to check out the teacher training right now. And if you miss it after 10:10, then enrollment will be closed. So you can join the wait list after that. But you will not have to wait to learn what the four great sayings are. Now, you might have heard some of these before. The Mahavakyas, these are the four great sayings in the Upanishads. And again, the Upanishads take the wisdom of the Vedas and make it a little more practical and applicable to everyday life. And again, that was chanted orally and passed down teacher to student for thousands of years now, all the way back to the 1750 BCE is roughly when we believe now that the Vedas were written down, but probably passed down orally even longer than that. And is passed down in this amazing cadence that is kind of hypnotic, kind of meditative to listen to. So it's really cool. This is exactly what they would have chanted thousands of years ago and have still chanted in this unbroken lineage for thousands of years. So you can listen to this, and if you watch the video, you'll see how these syllables kind of match up, and it makes this really cool kind of geometric pattern as well, just with the syllables. So let's listen to the chanting of the Vedas.
With Jatapata, every syllable is repeated 6 times. Sajanda yatra yatra sajanda sajanda yatra yatra purve purve yatra yatra purve purve sadhya sadhya purve purve sadhya sadhya santi sadhya sadhya santi deva deva santi deva deva iti deva.
Pretty cool, right? And if you watch the video, you saw at the end, there's like a image. It's the way it ripples out. It's kind of like when you drop a drop of water on a pond and it ripples out and it just keeps going out and out and out throughout the Vedas in that pattern. And there's several patterns like that. It's not just that one pattern, but it's very, very powerful. And just to listen, even if you don't know the words, you don't know the meaning, there can be a meditative state just from listening to that. So the first of the four great sayings essentially is saying that consciousness is Brahman. Now, Brahman is a word that could be universe, could be God, could be the Tao. Doesn't really matter how you interpret that, but it's that kind of energy. It's everything, the universe. And consciousness is that. So our consciousness that we connect to, that we don't really have a scientific understanding of yet, of what is consciousness, where does it arise, how do we make it arise? We can't seem to synthesize that yet, but maybe we're getting close with AI. But the real consciousness is Brahman. It's like this greater energy. And this is something that comes up a lot actually in Vedic astrology, in the sense of I can look at a transit, for example, in 2030, there's likely to be a big change of the money system in the global money system. And this is an example of something that seems very likely, but who's going to sort of initiate that? How is that going to happen? Because that's a global impact that you could say maybe the president of the US is going to be the one responsible for that decision, or it could be some country, some war, could be some external event, could be some individual person, but that energy is there regardless, right? So what is making that happen? Why is it happening? We can say from astrology, it's probably happening because of this pattern, right? When Saturn goes into Taurus, every time this happens, every 30 years, there's some big change in the financial currency of the world. The last time was the movement to the euro in Europe. And this kind of thing. So before that, there was a time when the gold standard was taken away in the US, Saturn and Taurus. and move to more of a fiat currency. So these kind of things happen when Saturn is in Aquarius. But is it because of the prime minister or the president or this government or that political party or these people or those people? It's this bigger thing. And I think, in my understanding of astrology, my experience with it, if it wasn't this president doing it, someone else would have done it somehow. Like this thing kind of needed to happen for some bigger reason than we could possibly know, and it happened. And the universe kind of moved in that way. And you could say it's a force of good or evil or good or bad or whatever, but is a sort of neutrality of like this is just part of what happens when Saturn is in Taurus or when Saturn is in Aquarius. Now, all these major AI breakthroughs. And you could say, is it because OpenAI had the best researchers and the most money and the best talent to make this happen? Or would it have just happened somehow? If it wasn't them, some other company would have done it because it just sort of needed to happen in this time. All right, that's a more global level. And I like to focus more on the personal level. So, on the personal level, consciousness is Brahman. So as we are more conscious, more aware, and so much of meditative work is about awakening consciousness, we connect to that bigger impact on others. We connect to the obvious connection where, like, when you exhale carbon dioxide, the trees breathe in carbon dioxide. And when the trees sort of exhale oxygen, we breathe in oxygen. So as our consciousness expands to become aware of how we are connected to just a tree, we start to see there's a bigger thing happening than just me and my independent will, right? And that consciousness is, when we are conscious, we are connected to Brahman, the bigger picture, the universe, source, God, divine, Shiva, Shakti, whatever you call it, the Tao. And that's Brahman. And that is something we're connected to. So again, don't get too attached to Brahman. This isn't about Hinduism or that you have to believe any particular thing. It's true across all traditions. It's that there is some greater force that we don't exactly know and understand that is bigger than us, that is moving in a way, and we can connect to it or be disconnected to it. And we can be unconscious. And typically things like drugs, alcohol, addictions take us out of consciousness. And we are no longer fully aware of what we're doing or why we're doing it or what we want. We're just drifting through life, reactive. Somebody does something, I'm angry. I should be angry. That's just how I react. I don't know why I'm angry, right? But then when you get under that and you start to observe yourself, you start to have more consciousness. You start to see how your anger might have come from an abusive parent, or and then their abuse may have come from their parent, right? You could just stop at the parent and blame everything on your parents. That's easy. Or you could go further and understand your parents, and maybe they had a similar cycle of abuse and their parents and so on. So as you expand your consciousness, you start to see it's like just so much bigger than me or you or any individual. And that is what this great saying is pointing us to, at least in my interpretation. And I think there may be many other ways to interpret this, my understanding of it. And I think that's a very helpful way to think about the universe is that as we want to connect more to understanding ourselves and others, we want to be more conscious. And as we become more conscious, we see that connection to others and everything around us, and that it's so much bigger than us. And it becomes very difficult to do anything that would hurt anybody because we know how it's going to impact us in the big picture. It's essentially, if you hurt someone else, you're hurting yourself. And if you're lying to someone else, you're lying to yourself. If you in any way cause harm, there's likely some harm coming back to yourself because it is all one thing. It's all one organism. Just like every cell in your body is part of one organism of your body, that's easy to understand. But each individual person is an Atman, a drop of the ocean. You could say Brahman is the ocean, the infinite, vast ocean of consciousness. And the Atman is my individual version or perspective of that, my drop of the ocean. And that drop is very important, actually. To my opinion, your opinion, different opinions, different perspectives is all very important because it's all part of the ocean. So we can totally disagree on things. We could totally have different views. And that's all actually necessary. It's part of the ocean. That's part of the Atman, the drops of the ocean. So consciousness is Brahman. The next great saying is, I am Brahman. So I'm not just conscious, I'm not just the Atman, I'm not just the one aware of this, but I am Brahman. I am the ocean. Again, it's like if I do something good to you, I'm doing something good to myself. If I do something harmful to you, I'm doing something harmful to myself. There is that I am a drop of the ocean, but I'm still the ocean as well. You are a drop of the ocean, you're still the ocean. And of course, this can be very empowering to the ego and very addictive and consumptive to the ego of like, oh, I can do anything. I am free. I am the creator. But anybody who really understands this doesn't go in that direction. Like to really understand it, you know that you are the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the heavy, the light, the soft, the hard, and you have all that within you. So then it becomes very hard to really judge anyone else, to criticize anyone else, to be disconnected from others. And when we look at astrology and we see maybe there's a political person you really don't like, politics are so charged lately, and you look at the chart and you realize they've got the same sun sign as you, or they've got the same moon as you. It's wait a minute, like how can I disagree with them and dislike them so much, but they're actually so similar to me if I actually look at it deeper? And we all have major differences and we all have major similarities. And as being part of the Brahman and being part of this bigger picture, we see how we're all necessary to that bigger picture. There needs to be people who are leaders just as much as there needs to be people who are followers. There needs to be people who are moving towards progressive ideas, and there needs to be people who are moving towards conservative ideas. If you go too far in one direction, there's disorder, there's chaos, there's destruction, which can happen too. It's not like that is a bad thing either. It's just something that could happen. But there is this natural sort of diversity in the universe and different perspectives. And when we forget that we are Brahman, we forget that we are not just this individual with feelings and reactions and emotions and judgments, then we get caught up in greed, wanting to take, because I need more because there's something empty inside of me that I'm not filling. It's really a Brahman shaped hole or a God shaped hole in ourselves that we're not connected to all these things. We're not connected to the universe. And this happens to all of us at different times. And then we think, well, I just need this. I just need this one more thing, or I need this validation, or this attention, or this money, or this relationship. And then I'll feel fulfilled. And there is some human needs in there. There's some truth in some of that. So we need to survive. We need emotional connection. We need these kind of human needs, survival, safety, security. But beyond that, beyond those basic needs and then some growth needs and things like that and contribution, we really don't need to have the greed or the addiction or the control or these kind of things or these neurotic behaviors that come from forgetting who we really are. Brahman. The next Upanishad, again, these are just my interpretations, my understanding as somebody who's been on this path for a long time. But I think everyone will have different interpretations. But that thou art, or that art thou. Basically, if I look outside of myself and I see a beautiful flower, it's because I can see beauty in myself. If I look outside myself and see a greedy miser, it's because there's some greedy miser in me as well, the good and the bad. If I see beauty around me, there's some beauty inside myself. If I see evil around me, there's some evil inside myself. And it actually is endless. All of these things are within us. And oftentimes when we point the finger at others and say, they are so mean, they never do this, they always do that. There's this saying that when you point one finger at someone else, you're pointing three back at yourself. And that's when this phrase, that thou art, I think is very useful in doing shadow work and understanding ourselves. Like, they are so greedy. Well, is it true? Is there some part of me that is greedy also? Can I find that in myself? No, no, no. I would never be greedy. Only they're greedy. I would never be like that. But if we dig deeper, usually there is some truth in it. And I always encourage to just explore and consider, is it true? Is there any inkling, 1% of truth in this? Sometimes there actually isn't. Sometimes it actually is a fair assessment of like, hey, actually, that person was being a little out of line there and hurtful or whatever. But most of the time, there is some truth in like looking outside of ourselves, having a judgment, and then turning around and looking within to better understand ourselves, to better understand like that we have all these parts within us. And there can be a lot of compassion for the other person and an awareness of what kind of boundaries need to be there. Right? If somebody's stealing from you and you look at yourself, well, yeah, I could steal. I take things that are not given sometimes. I've seen that. I've done that in myself. But still that person is stealing from you, like then you do need to have a boundary. You do need to say, we're not going to hang out anymore, or I don't trust you, or we need to talk about this. Right? It's not about just like turning everything back on yourself and being a victim. But it's having the consciousness and awareness of these parts that we sometimes push away and reject in ourselves. We see them in others and we don't want to see them in ourselves. That's one way, the shadow work of working with this, that thou art great saying, I think is very powerful. And then there's the golden side of it, the light side of it, of if you've got this teacher and you're like, they're just so amazing. Oh my God, they're so brilliant. She says the best things. She does this, she does that. But I could never be a teacher. I could never do that. No one would ever, why would I do anything, this kind of thing? That is also the time to apply this, that thou art. If you see this in them, there's probably some of it in yourself as well. This was very helpful for me when I was like looking at my career direction in my early 20s. What do I want to do? I wrote down a list of maybe 5 to 7 of like people I really admired. Like I really admired Steve Jobs and Oprah Winfrey. Well, what do I admire about them? Well, Steve Jobs, very innovative and creative and focused. Is there some part of me that can be innovative, creative, and focused? And when I just turn those words around, the light onto myself, it's like, yeah, I can be that. And maybe sometimes I think I could be more, or I'm not enough of those things I want to be, but I can definitely bring those out more. And now seeing it in him is like a surrogate almost, or a beacon of like how I can bring it out of myself. And then you can even go a step further and look at the Vedic astrology of his birth chart and see what is it in his chart that is similar to my chart. And I can really hone in on that energy and cultivate it. Same with Oprah or anybody else. What is it about them that I see the light that I could cultivate in myself? And the next step would be to look at the astrology and see what we have similar that we could bring out. So that's an example of that thou art and understanding others to better understand ourselves. It's again, better understand others, to have more compassion for others, more curiosity, more inspiration from others, more boundaries with others, and then take it off people and just look around the universe and look at nature and the things you admire in nature or the beauty in nature or the lack of beauty, right? If you have a beat up car and you don't care about your car, is there some part of you that's not taking care of your body and yourself and your own vehicle of consciousness? Or if you have a very beat up car and you want to take care of it, there's an interesting thing that usually happens where you take better care of your car, your home, your environment, your health starts to follow, your diet follows, your body follows. And it's not just you're taking care of your car, it's not just you're maybe taking care of the garden in your neighborhood or in your yard. It's you're taking care of yourself because that thou art. And then finally, the self is Brahman. The self is Brahman. So this self that I have this name, I have this role, this identity. I am separate from you, and I need to compete with you, and I need to make more money than you, or I have more status than you, or have more friends than you, or this or that. These kind of egoic things that we get caught up in. It's because we've forgotten that the real self is Brahman. So when we come back to awareness, consciousness, we start to see all these things I've talked about today. And we see that in astrology through the Atmakarika, the soul indicator. There is an essence to you, a drop of the ocean that you are here to manifest and a role to play. Just like if you're in a play, a theater, you play the role of the doctor or the role of the nurse or the role of the teacher. And in this life as a human, you're here to play this role of the teacher or the friend or the mother or the daughter or the occupation you have. You play this role, but just like in a theater play, a stage play, if you did this in school or theater, you get off the stage and you're back to yourself. So it's important with this, what this is saying, one way of looking at this is that, yeah, you're on the stage of life. You're born into this body, this family, this occupation, this career path, whatever. And it's just a role you're playing. But the real self is the Atman, the drop of the ocean. But the even further back, the real self is the Brahman. We're just all expressions of the universe. Just like every cell in my body thinks, I don't know if it has consciousness, but maybe it thinks it's an individual cell. But I'm up here as the body, like there's just trillions of cells in my body. I'm me. And the universe is way back, zoomed way out from the earth. Like the earth is just one little cell inside the universe. And we forget this sometimes, but these four great sayings help us remember these things. And if you want to go deeper into the yoga philosophy, the spiritual philosophy behind the Vedic astrology that we practice and teach here on the podcast, quietmind.yoga/workshop. Become your own yoga teacher. I lay out the whole path for you, 10 core competencies, 10 skills to master in yoga throughout your lifetime, how to do it, how to assess where you are, and how to know what to do next on that path. And if you're really ready to go deeper, the Quiet Mind Yoga Teacher Training is now open, quietmind.yoga/YTT. You can email me if you have more questions or message me on Instagram at Quiet Mind Astrology. But that is the place to go deeper. And you can check out the Yoga Teacher Training podcast also. Lots of resources if you want to check out what I do in the yoga world is very similar to astrology, but just focused on the asana, the pranayama, the practices to integrate and apply this stuff. And now we're going to go into the Friday forecast, briefly talk about the transits happening this week from October 4th, 2024. Starting with on October 4th, we have Venus moving into Vishaka. So Venus, the planet of beauty, love, art, and harmony, into Vishaka, this energy that is good at getting stuff done. It's an expansive energy of growth in relationships in Libra. And it's a powerful energy. So if there's something you want to improve in relationships for these 10 days, October 4 to 14, it's a great time to improve your relationships, set goals in relationships, move forward in a new direction, and have more growth and expansion. Learning things about relationships, studying relationships, very beneficial at this time. Then on Sunday, October 6th, we've got Mercury in Chitra, and still it's exalted in Virgo. Very good place for Mercury to be. Great for learning, great for standing out with your intelligence, sharing ideas, deepening your education, learning about health and wellness, learning about yoga, doing yoga practices, cleaning your house, cleaning closets. It's a very powerful time for organizing, systemizing, and stepping into your brilliance and your light and your way of expressing your wisdom. Look where Mercury is in your chart to see this. Like, for example, me, I have Mercury in Pisces, which is a very spiritual energy. So I like to share information in a very spiritual way. So Mercury in Pisces. But look where Mercury is in your chart. This Mercury in Virgo is amplifying it for everybody and bring out the gifts in Mercury. The messenger. So next, not so long after, Mercury move into Libra, still in Chitra though. So it's in Chitra for 7 days, but now in Libra from October 9th for 19 days. And Mercury in Libra now brings all that wisdom, intelligence, and communication into relationships. Great time for talking about what you value in relationships, setting goals together, and expressing yourself artistically through poetry, art, music, and writing lyrics, things like this. Very powerful during this time. Great time for learning about yoga. Also, Mercury and Venus, any sort of yoga practice, very good. Any sort of physical alignment-based, harmonious practice, very good. Ballet, things like this, martial arts. And then also on October 9th is when Jupiter moves retrograde in Taurus. So Jupiter's been in Taurus since May, and now it goes retrograde for 4 months in Taurus, going back to teachers that worked well for us in the past and lessons that we've learned, relearning them, slowing down in your expansion, lots of growth and expansion to this point. Now a little more contraction, bringing energy in, grounding, containing energy, and going into deeper philosophy from things you've learned in the past, returning to teachings that you've learned, old teachings as well, like the Upanishads would be great to study at this time, getting that book or the Bhagavad Gita would be great as well. Then on October 10th, Sun in Chitra in Virgo. So Sun is in a brilliant, bright star and a great place for it to be, a friendly sign of Virgo, and Mars rules Chitra. So it's a great time for taking action for 12 days from October 10th to 22nd, stepping into the spotlight, sharing your gifts, owning your power and your confidence, and doing things physically like exercise, weightlifting, vinyasa yoga, martial arts, things like this, very powerful. In these 12 days, October 10th to 22nd, with Sun in Chitra Nakshatra. And that's our look at the transits happening this week. If you enjoyed the podcast, share with a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and check out the Become Your Own Yoga Teacher workshop, quietmind.yoga/workshop, and go a little deeper with me in your yoga practice. Even if you're a total beginner, even if you're very experienced, that path of learning is a lifelong, never-ending thing to explore. And it's super fun to go into and see where you're at and see what you want to improve in yourself. And I also give you a daily check-in practice that's very valuable and a way to release tensions when they rise. Because waking up with pain sometimes is inevitable, but living with pain oftentimes is optional. And we just need to know how to work with the pain and work with the physical layer. And when we do that, then we can get to the breath, the pranayama, the pranamaya kosha, the energy layer, and then the deeper aspects of yoga and spirituality, which are really, really powerful. But you've got to work with the physical layer first. And as a daily maintenance thing, take care of this body that we have. So hopefully you found this helpful. Look forward to sharing more with you next time on the Quiet Mind Astrology podcast.